Hey guys, it's Linux Next here, and in today's video, we are going to be looking at GNOME 47 and Fedora 41, which this is the beta version of Fedora 41, so things can change, but we're going to be looking at some of the new features that are in GNOME 47, and how I would say this release specifically for 47 is a pretty big release, and it does mean a lot for the GNOME users who are always trying to use GNOME as their main workstation. So let's just get right into it. The first one is custom accent colors. Of course, new wallpapers from GNOME and a fix with how wallpapers load in the settings. So if we do go to our settings here and we go to the appearance, there is some color options now to choose from. Wow, finally, GNOME has done it finally. They've added color options. Wow. Insane, I know, right? Well, there is only a couple presets of colors that you can actually choose from. You can't just choose any random color. This was a pretty big conversation from the merge requests. I remember there was a lot of people talking about it, and it took a very long time for everyone to decide on like what colors should be used and how it should be done. And as you can see here, there is color options. So there's the default blue, there's this teal, there's a green, there's a yellow, there's an orange, there's a red. Now I like this red. It's not like dark red, it's like a more lighter red, so it just fits well with the other UI color elements of like the dark color. But we have pink also, and we have purple, and we have slate. So slate just being the boring kind of like bluish gray color, very just simple color to choose from. But for me, I like red. It's a very nice color. It looks very nice with the whole Adwada GTK theme going on with GNOME. It looks very nice. And there is a new wallpaper. I'm pretty sure it is this one, as we can see here. It looks pretty alright. If we do go to the light mode, it switches, as you can see. So very nice, very easy wallpaper to use. I'm pretty sure this one has been used before plenty of times. I don't know if that's a new one. It looks new, but I swear I've seen it before in other releases. But yeah, I think this is the only new one. And there is a Fedora wallpaper that was included in Fedora 41 for the release, and that looks pretty okay also. And one of the issues that I've always had with GNOME has been when you enter the appearance settings in GNOME settings, if you have a lot of wallpapers and the wallpapers are in big size, or not even really a big size, maybe like a medium size of wallpapers that you have in the background option, when you launch appearance, it literally takes forever, even to the point where the settings would freeze and crash. Very bad. It lasted quite a long time until the GNOME developers actually decided to improve it. They improved it in 46, but then in 47, they use, I think, some type of asynchronization of loading the wallpapers really quickly, and it works extremely well. I'll show a demonstration. If we go into settings, we just open it, boom, one wallpapers are loaded. So freaking easy, so fast, so smooth, awesome. Good job to GNOME developers. That is actually the most annoying thing that I dealt with when using GNOME for the past like year and a half that I used GNOME as my main desktop, was that trying to change your wallpaper in the appearance settings was extremely annoying because I had a lot of upscaled wallpapers. So again, it would just freeze and crash, and that no longer happens. And yeah, it's really easy. Switching the wallpapers really quick, really fluid. Good job. Now, when it comes to dialogues, there is a new confirmation dialog when you are using any type of like GNOME application that wants you to confirm something. So for example, I noticed that when I changed my refresh rate on my monitors, so if we change my refresh rate of my 60 Hertz monitor here to like 50 Hertz and we hit apply, as you can see, there is a keep this display settings change, and it looks a little bit different now. We'll just go reverse settings, so it goes back to 60 Hertz instead of 50 Hertz. And I would say that confirmation dialog is pretty nice. Now, one of the other things is that if you unplug a monitor and it has a bunch of applications on that monitor, it is able to restore those windows a lot more accurately now when it tries to restore them. So yeah, if I unplugged my 60 Hertz monitor, which has my video script of this video, and then I replugged it back in, that application would more accurately go back to where it was before, which is basically full screening. One of the other things is a better lock screen notification setting or design that's being shown now. So when you log out or you go into your lock screen, the notifications look a lot better. I'll show a screenshot of what that looks like. It is a lot better, I would say. But I never use lock screen, so I don't really care. But for people that do care, that do use the lock screen, it looks a lot better now. And the clock is centered on the lock screen now, which is quite funny that it was always not centered and now it is finally centered. They actually decided to change that, so that's really good to see also. And one of the other little things, but it is a pretty big thing, I would say, is that now the cursor is driven by your hardware. So now your cursor is going to use a non-atomic kernel mode setting. The GPU provides a overlay image for screen frame buffering. Moving the cursor doesn't require redrawing the portions of the desktop that were overwritten by the cursors. Non-atomic here means that the requested settings are sent to the kernel serially, not concurrently. Now, I don't know what that means, but what it does mean is that, cursor is going to be controlled a lot better now, and it's not going to use as much, I guess, CPU usage. It's going to use more of your hardware in a more efficiently way. Now, one of the other things is screen recording. You can now screen record with your GPU. So there is hardware encoding now. As before, it was all software encoding. And I mean, it wasn't really that big of an issue, as there's plenty of other screen recorders that do support GPU encoding, like OBS or GPU screen recorder. But now the good thing is that it's built right into the Gnome Desktop. And that's the same thing with KDE Plasma. They also implemented hardware encoding with Spectacle, which is the screenshot/recording application built into KDE Plasma. So that's really good to see that Gnome has finally done that also. So if you have a GPU, it's going to use whatever codec for your GPU encoding, and it's going to perform extremely well. Now, there is a bit of another performance boost in Gnome 47, I would say. So if you are just, running around in the Gnome Desktop, opening up different applications, etc., it's going to perform extremely good now because of how it handles asynchronous processes and jobs. So the way they achieve this is by the Gnome initial setup copy worker job launches the first time a user logs in and copies a set of files to the home directory. Thanks to this change, Gnome no longer depends on the slower Gnome virtual file system or Gnome's extraction layer, which should bring a significant performance increase. So yeah, it's going to handle your processes in the background, and how Gnome launches just a whole lot better, which means there is going to be a performance boost when you are running around the desktop and just looking around, just moving around the desktop. It does feel a lot better, I would say, when just moving around on the desktop. It's a lot more quicker, a lot more smoother, a lot less stutters, I would say. There were some little things like drag and drop improvements, probably with things that like the Chrome browser, for example. I know that has a pretty long history with the drag and drop issue under Wayland. It likes to trash, so that probably got fixed if I have to guess. It just says drag and drop improvements. Probably what that means is something like Chrome got fixed. Now, one of the other things is that the GTK4 header theme is trying to get more properly implemented with certain applications. So there's certain applications that now show the GTK4 theme more properly than before it would show the GTK3 theme. Now, this doesn't happen on every application, but for example, if I show OBS right now, it does have the GTK4 header, but if we have a look at my script on Notesnook, it is using the GTK3 header, as we can see. So it's a bit of some applications aren't using it, or some others can use it. It's probably something to do with some type of decoration theming that's happening on the client side or server side, probably something to do with that. And so not every application is able to use the GTK4 header, but you can solve this anyways. Like I remember I used a GTK4 theme that you could use for third-party applications, and then that to solve the problem would just use the GTK4 header. But yeah, they're trying to implement it a lot more into other applications by default, and it seems to be working with some applications. All right, and this is where we get into the Gnome applications, as it has gotten, or not a lot of the applications in Gnome have gotten really good, I would say, with some pretty awesome improvements, like with Gnome Files, for example. I know Nautilus, that has a decent amount of improvements that we are going to go into, but there's also some little things like the Gnome Calendar, for example. If we can find it right here, it does now support ICS file importing via drag and drop, so that's really good to see. I know this is maintained by one person, which is quite insane, but it does work really well when it comes to marking events that you want to do, or like I said, like now it supports ICS file importing, so that's really good to see. So one of the other applications that did get improved was Gnome Files, as I talked about just before. It got a brand new file chooser, a redesigned sidebar. As you can notice right here, it has different categories now, which looks really nice, set up well. And there is a network application now in Nautilus that you can go into that is on the sidebar, and it will pick up any type of networks, which it does say here that it was like revamped or redesigned, so it's a better improvement. Now, I don't have any network connection set up, so I can't set something up to actually show you what it actually looks like, but as you can see, it's actually in Nautilus, so you can easily access those things now. And the other thing I heard was that that drives that are mounted, they show up a lot better now. As you can see, I've got some here that are mounted, and I also have my other partition, which is the Bazzite partition I'm running currently with Fedora 41 also. And one of the other applications that did get improved was the Epiphany or GNOME web browser. Now, personally, I've used this browser a couple times. Like, it always disappoints me when I'm actually using it. How it looks is really nice. Like, it's designed with GTK4. It looks really freaking good. And if we look at the improvements, it was like they now include features such as autofill, a bookmark search bar. So when you're searching up here, you can search for bookmarks. We have a privacy reporting feature now, and you can do importing passwords from a CSV file. Now, one of the very big features I would say that improves the GNOME desktop by a lot is big fractional scaling improvements with xwayland or X11 applications running through the Wayland desktop. As if you don't know, fractional scaling on GNOME is kind of bad, I would say, and you had to use usually a modified version of the GNOME desktop to get some experimental features working with the xwayland fractional scaling, but most people didn't do that, so you couldn't do really good fractional scaling with xwayland applications. But as we can see here, if we look at the merge request of xwayland clients, it was merged into GNOME 47. Now, what does this mean? Well, now xwayland applications can scale themselves a lot better with this thing called scale-monitor-framebuffer. Now, this is an experimental feature, so it is not enabled by default, and you will have to enable it through a G setting variable or environment variable to actually get it working. I'll leave it down in the description where you can copy and paste it into your terminal. And after you reboot your computer, I'm pretty sure you have to reboot your computer, you can go into your display settings. You just go through here, go to display, and we click on a monitor. There should be more advanced options for scaling where you can do scaling from 100 to 125, just so that you can actually get proper fractional scaling, but also now xwayland applications won't look as blurry as they did before. And that's the big improvement, is when you launch an application like Steam, for example, it does not look blurry anymore when you enable that G setting option. So I do hope that that is enabled in GNOME 48, because it's a really big improvement, and a lot of people are not going to know about this option, how to enable it, unless they watch my video or some other people's videos that talk about the new fractional scaling improvements. And one of the other features that got introduced was finally VRR or FreeSync into the GNOME desktop. It got introduced into GNOME 46 as an advanced variable that you can enable with G settings. As you can see, I have it enabled right now, and it has zero problems now. When I used it on GNOME 46, I had a couple issues with when you used to watch videos in full screen, the cursor would get capped to the FPS of the video that was playing in full screen, and there was some heavy flickering that was going on. That was similar to how KD Plasma used to work with VRR, but using it now, it works extremely well. So as you can see, it is a advanced option that you do need to enable in your terminal. I'll leave it in the description for you to enable it. And after you enable it, you just need to log out of your computer, log back in, and then you can enable it if your monitor does support FreeSync or VRR. And there's some honorable mentions of some other applications that have gotten some support lately, like Gnome Maps, for example. That got some introduction to like dark mode themes. That's really good to see finally, so you don't get blinded with the white theme. It does actually show public transport icons. So let's say we go into Australia here, the country that I live in. If we go to Melbourne, we just zoom all the way in. As we can see, it does show public transport icons now. So we can click around. There is one here. There's like another one here. It just shows like directions that you can get from these particular places, like Tate Timber and hardware parking. You can get directions if you want to go to there. But yeah, it's really cool to see that there is a dark mode and there is public transport icons now of what you can actually view. So it is really good to see that GNOME Maps has gotten these improvements. Running on my hardware, it does actually run extremely well. So when it comes to actually using the application now, because I remember when using this application like 2 years ago, it was performance was rather crap, I would say, and it didn't have dark mode, it didn't have transport icons. It was pretty bare bones, I would say. There wasn't a lot going for it now, but GNOME Maps, I could see it being a really good application when it comes to the mobile aspect. Like using GNOME Mobile with this would probably work really well, but you can also use it on desktop, which is really awesome. And one of the other applications that did get improved was the GNOME Calls application. It is now in GTK4. It got ported to GTK4, and that brings it in line with the whole GNOME Adwaita GTK look. Looks very nice, and I bet this is another application that will look very streamlined in the GNOME mobile aspect. Seems like it's pretty useful, pretty simple CORS application. Now, one of the other really cool features that have been improved is the GNOME Remote Desktop. It now supports persistent remote login sessions. Now, I don't use Remote Desktop, but I would know that reading that is a really good thing. So no longer do you have to keep entering your credentials to actually keep continuing that remote desktop login session. You can just leave it as a persistent remote session, and then that improves the login session. And then also some other things that have been fixed is like it's improved the GRDCTL status reporting. A bug has been fixed that addresses a file descriptor leak. A file descriptor were not being correctly freed up when a file was no longer required, meaning the descriptor was not available for reuse. So that's really good that the remote desktop now has persistent remote desktop, and it fixed some descriptor leak. That's really good. You can now use remote desktop really well, have your persistent login session. There's really no issues now. Now, sadly, when it comes to the triple buffering, or they say dynamic triple/double buffering, it is not available in this release. And it seems like the milestone has been changed to GNOME 48. So we're going to have to continue to wait for this to arrive in the GNOME desktop. Hopefully it does, because there is a lot of laptops that would love to benefit from this, and it would be awesome if it was in this release, because I know some other developers who were maintaining the GNOME desktop, like Nobara, for example, with Glorious Eggroll. He moved to KDE Plasma because of issues like this, where it takes a long time for this to be introduced. And as you can see, it was introduced 4 years ago. So, that's not really that great, I would say. I wish this was moved in quicker, because, my laptop, for example, could perform a lot better when it comes to having triple buffering. It makes the desktop so much smoother, and I know the Ubuntu desktop version of GNOME has this ported into the desktop, so then users get a better, more smoother experience. And one of the other Wayland protocols that got merged into GNOME was the XDG Session Management Protocol. So what this is basically is it allows for a client to ask the compositor to save its Windows state or position. So this is really good. It means that if you were to reboot your computer and had a restore state, similar to KDE Plasma, how they do that restore state thing when you reboot your computer and then the windows come back up, GNOME now has this protocol that allows that similar thing to happen. So if you close some application, if the client does ask for it, it should respawn in the similar position as it was last time, or the exact same position. So that's also amazing that this has been finally merged, and it was only created 3 months ago. So that's really good to see that it didn't take that long for them to implement that. Now, there is some other things that are being worked on, of course, in the GNOME desktop, like HDR, for example. The GNOME developers have been working on that, and it seems to be going, I think, quite well. It may have some stopping gaps where they may have to work on it for a while, but when it comes to the progress, it seems to be going well, and it might be available in it's GNOME, so I would say a year's time, maybe after GNOME 49 maybe, or 48 if I had to guess. Not 48, maybe either GNOME 49 or GNOME 50. I would say that HDR would probably be a thing on the GNOME desktop. And one of the other features that I think a lot of people really want in the Wayland desktop, and Plasma 6.2 is already has this feature. Plasma 6.2 isn't out yet. It's in beta right now, but you can test it, and it does indeed work. And that is to support async page flip / tearing, which this isn't really tearing, as we know, as tearing is something that accidentally happens when something goes wrong with the X and Y of the frames that are coming in on your monitor. Something goes wrong with how the GPU processes it or whatever, and so you get a tear. So what this uses is a async, and I was doing a bit of research about this when Plasma 6.2 did merge this, and it does present basically the quickest frame that can happen on your screen, which of course that introduces a lot of good low latency when playing FPS games if you want to, because that's a big blocker, I would say. There's a lot of people that want to play FPS games games, maybe FPS games a bit competitively, and they want the closest edge to winning fights in a video game, where on Wayland Desktop, there's no async page flip, there's no tearing option that there used to be on Plasma, but then that got disabled. And so yeah, this option that now is going to be merged at some point in GNOME will introduce that, and you'll be able to get, you combine it with VRR, and then you combine it with the tearing protocol in GNOME, you get a really good experience. And one of the other, well, not protocols, the XGG desktop portal in GNOME, the implementation of global shortcuts. Now, this has been, it was created 2 years ago. So when it comes to, the GNOME developers looking into this and trying to, I guess, merge it, it hasn't really progressed. It's taking them quite a while. And if you do scroll to the bottom here, it was 3 months ago was the last one. And as you know, KDE Plasma already supports this portal. And I know of one application that did implement it, and that was GPU Screen Recorder. I know the developer actually does watch my videos, and because I like to promote GPU Screen Recorder, I'm guessing that's probably why he watches my videos, I guess. And he did implement the shortcut protocol for the KDE Plasma desktop, and he was telling me that GNOME hasn't merged it yet, and there's a whole problem. And yeah, when looking at it, they don't really seem like there's been some related merge requests. It seems like when it comes to whenever this is arriving, like there's concept art for this, so it definitely can be merged into the GNOME desktop probably. Like now, I bet they probably could do it in like either a big release of GNOME, probably they would have to do it. So GNOME 48, they would have to introduce this, but it is one of the blockers, I would say, for different applications like Discord, for example. If they wanted to implement shortcuts under Wayland, they probably would have to use the desktop portal for the global shortcuts protocol. So really, we're waiting on GNOME when it comes to this issue. They seem to be, like I said, they're not really progressing. It was 3 months ago. They're probably not going to touch this probably till the next release of GNOME. Maybe they might do something. Well, KDE Plasma has already implemented it, and really we're just waiting for GNOME to do it. And other desktops like Cosmic. Now, Cosmic is in alpha stages, so it's kind of okay for them not to introduce this protocol yet into their version of the XGG desktop portal. But for GNOME, I mean, like, come on, you should implement this as basically as soon as possible. Now, every time I decide to use the GNOME desktop, I always see the little issues why I don't use this desktop. I love GNOME's design. I love Adwaita. I love the GTK toolkit. Beautiful applications, beautiful designs. But there's always the desktop that bugs me with continuous little things. That's why I use KDE Plasma in my head. And one of them is simple. The GNOME panels. The panel is only on your main monitor. Why can't I have an option to simply allow the panel to be displayed on all monitors? Now, I know some of you are going to comment and go, there's an extension that you can use. There's an extension that you can use. Yes, there is an extension that I can use. One, it is a little bit buggy the last time I used it. I was like GNOME 44 or 45, I think I tried that extension. And I think what it did was it tried to, whenever you had a full screen game, the panel would be moved onto the other monitors so then you can see your time. Because that's one of the big things. When I'm playing a full screen game, I want to see my time. I want to see what the time is. But I can't. Basically, where I have to install an extension like the panel extension on GNOME, which then duplicates on all your monitors if you want to. I really do wish it was just a simple option that you could just enable in the settings. It would be toggled off by default. Person could enable it if they want their panel to be shown on all monitors. Or like if you go into a full screen game, then the panel goes onto the other monitors, and then when you unfull screen the game, it goes back to your main monitor. Something like that would be so simple, and it would solve that problem for me. And probably other people have this problem also. Now, one other one that I did say last time was about GNOME applications being organized automatically for you. Because when you make multiple pages, if you have like one application in that extra page that you have on like a third page, for example, it's not going to reorganize itself. It's not going to push the calls application, so then that other page that was there before is no longer there. It's just going to be a third page with the calls application in it. That's really annoying. I wish there was an option to enable this so the GNOME applications can just automatically organize themselves. I know the accessibility, like the customization wise of why this is a by default thing, and that's why I wish there was just a simple option that you could enable that isn't enabled by default, but you could enable it and then it just organizes your application applications for you. And then the other one is I really do wish the GNOME software, like I love the design of GNOME software. It is awesome. It looks so much nicer than the Discover store, I would say. I mean, Discover store is getting a lot of redesigns I've seen from different merge requests, a lot of new concept designs, but nothing major has really changed with Discover. I guess it's some performance improvements, but when it comes to GNOME software, I would say the design is a lot better. But then the GNOME software, I would say, falls short when it comes to installing applications, or when you're installing an application. Like for example, if I install some random application like Dino, for example, we go the Flatpak version, we just install it and we'll just walk around, search for something, I don't know, type some random letters like hi, for example, or hope or something, just some random words. As you can see, it's just like when you're searching for words, like now it's okay, but sometimes what will happen is the process of installing the application will interrupt the search and you'll have to wait a bit longer before that application is installed. Now for that application, it installed pretty quickly because I'm guessing I already had the dependencies installed from Flatpak, so it just didn't take that long. But when it comes to just when you're installing applications and then you start browsing around the store, it likes to interrupt you of that other application that is installing. And I wish that was different, where that could have a separate like process so it wasn't interrupting my experience when going around the GNOME software store. And then the other one in GNOME software is that when you're installing an application, there's just a random stop button on the top left. It gives you no indication of like what that stop button is going to do, unless you remembered that you're installing an application. But as a normie user, you may not know what that is. And so you'll just be confused as to what, because the stop application comes up here, goes over the search icon, and then you're just like, well, what does the stop application do? Does it stop the application from installing, or does it do something else? Until you find out what that is and you actually click on it, then it stops the application from installing. But it's just like, can you give an indication similar to like Nautilus, how it has like a, when you're moving a file over, it shows an indication of like what you're moving over. It could just be an indication of what application is being installed. So you don't have to go to the installed part to look at the application that is being installed. Now that we're done with GNOME 47 release, we've basically looked over the majority of things, of new things that have arrived in the desktop, and it seems to be a really good release for the GNOME folks. And my complaints about GNOME and some of the things that I wish was changed, or just like a little option that was available, we can now look at Fedora. Fedora 41 is in beta at the moment. This is what we're running right now on the GNOME desktop, and it seems like it's going to be a pretty good release. And why is that? Because of DNF5. DNF5 is finally here when it comes to installing system applications. It installs applications rather fast, I would say, but there still is a main problem with DNF5, and that is the metadata. So when you're installing an application, right, the actual install speed is faster than, let's say, DNF4, because it's completely redesigned. And I'll show up some speed comparisons of where I tested DNF4 versus DNF5. So if you see right now, it should be DNF4 should be faster. Now this is in a distro box, by the way, so it's containerized, so this might be a little bit different, but I tried to streamline it with one application, which was game mode. And if we look at the speed test, we can see that DNF4 is quicker than DNF5. But I think the only reason it might be faster is because of the metadata that it's grabbing it from. Because on DNF5, when you're installing an application, like let's say DNF remove game mode, just remove it, and then we install it again. And I would say that installs it pretty fast, I would say. But when we compare it to DNF5 / Fedora 41 versus something like Arch, well, Arch blows the living crap out of Fedora, I would say still. It just speeds through it. It's like doing nothing, basically. I think it was like under a second, I think it was able to install. And then we also did DNF5 versus OpenSUSE. Now, OpenSUSE, I would say, is a bit slower than Fedora when it comes to installing system applications. So it was, it was also pretty hard when it came to the metadata part before actually installing the applications. That's why it just took longer. And that's why I think DNF5 is really good when it comes to the actual revamp of DNF5. But when it comes to the metadata part, it still struggles on that part. And when you compare it to any Debian or Ubuntu-based distro or Arch, it's just so much better than when it comes to the speed of installing system applications. Now, of course, this doesn't really matter. I do not care when it comes to installing system applications. I'm not really installing many system applications. I'm mostly installing Flatpak applications nowadays. So for me, it doesn't really matter. I could use any distro and I would not really care necessarily of like how fast it is. But for people that do care, DNF5 is an improvement, but it still lags behind just a little bit when it comes to like Arch or Ubuntu or Debian based distros. Now, one of the really good things I would say about Fedora 41 is they brought back the NVIDIA driver in the GNOME software store, or just in general the store. So you can now search up the NVIDIA driver, and it did enable the NVIDIA repo as well by default, which was really good, or not by default. When I clicked to enable third-party repos, it enabled it. And as you can see, the NVIDIA Linux graphics driver is now here. And you can see it's in the RPM Fusion non-free repo, NVIDIA driver, and you can easily grab it. And the reason this was removed was because of secure boot issues. So now those have been fixed. You can now install the driver in the GNOME software store, and you're good to go. You can just reboot, and your driver is installed. And of course, not just that one, it does support the older ones like the 470. I can see here is there, and you can install the control panel and some other little things like they enabled the boot up D for Fedora Atomic desktops and IoT. Now, I do not know what that is. If we do search up boot up D, as we can see, we did find it. It is a distribution independent updates for bootloaders. Today, many Linux systems handle updates for bootloader data in an inconsistent and ad hoc way. For example, on Fedora and Debian, a package manager update will update UEFI binaries in /boot/EFI, but not the BIOS MBR data. Transactional/image update systems like OS3 and dual partition systems like the Container Linux update system are more consistent. They normally cover kernel/user space, but not anything related to bootloaders. The reason for this is straightforward. Performing bootloader updates in A/B fashion requires completely separate, non-trivial logic from managing the kernel in root file system. Today's OS3 makes the choice that it does not update /boot/EFI and also doesn't update the BIOS MBR. The goal of this project is to be a cross-distribution OS update system agnostic tool to manage updates for things like /boot/EFI, x86 BIOS MBR, and other architecture bootloaders. So this is used in lots of Atomic-based distros. So like if you used Bazzite, for example, that would get updated with this. Or if you use Fedora Silverblue, like I was using Fedora Silverblue like last week, I think it was, and I was using the Fedora 41 beta image of Fedora Silverblue, and it ran really well. So there you go. That improvement has been enabled for those Atomic distros. And the other one is Fedora 41 does have Plasma 6.2 now. So if we do go to our terminal, and if we just search up sudo dnf install the Plasma Desktop, as you can see, it is on the 6.1.90, which is the beta version of Plasma 6.2. So that is extremely good to see, because I was a bit worried that like Fedora 41 wouldn't get Plasma 6.2, and then the Fedora folks would have to wait a little bit, maybe like a couple of weeks to get Plasma 6.2, because it is a really good release, I would say. When I was using it on my Arch-based system, it was extremely good, I would say. So that's the conclusion of this video. GNOME 47, a pretty damn good release. Still has a couple things that would be needed in the desktop to make it feel a lot more complete, and there's still things that are in experimental phases still on the GNOME desktop, like VRR. That doesn't need to be experimental. There's some other couple things that are being worked on. So we'll see how GNOME goes out, if things do actually continue to improve and get new features. And this makes the whole Linux desktop space more good when it comes to a end user or a new user wanting to try out Linux, because that's what matters. That is what matters, basically, is a new user that wants to try out the Linux desktop. They want to try GNOME, and they should get a good experience out of it. And they mostly do, but there is some little things that still need to be merged or enabled by default to get a really good experience. And Fedora 41 seems to be a great release, including the latest desktop environments, newer packages, enabling the NVIDIA driver back into the store so you can easily install it. Really good update, I would say. And this video is probably going to be extremely long, so if you've made it to the end of this video, seriously, give it a like. You can definitely subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate it if you do. I do put a decent amount of effort into these videos where I just go over things, and sometimes they go for a really long time. Sometimes I do rants, like right now is happening. But yeah, thank you to my subscribers. I really do appreciate you guys. Thank you to my members also. I'll show a screenshot of them now. I really do appreciate. I appreciate my editor also, Nulla, legend, who's going to be editing this video. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.